Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the Three Topics Gamer, here to give you another episode of my weekly Q&A, titled People's Questions, or answer a series of questions that have been sent to me over the past week. For this particular episode, it was pretty standard. I think we had like 6 questions, only one new person, as well as a few questions I was able to answer in the comment section of the last video. So if you don't hear it in the video, you know where to look unless you haven't already been notified. So like always, before I start answering guys' questions, if you haven't already, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channels. That way you can keep track of me and all my future episodes of People's Questions, as well as other future video projects that I'll be uploading, because heck, I'm uploading a lot of content this month. So starting off with the first question, coming from Phantom Cities. And moving forward, guys, remember, try to keep to literally like one question. Few people actually try to do this little thing where they answer one question and that leads into another question. So just try to keep it strictly just to one question. But the Phantom Cities wants to know, what, in my opinion, out of all the characters, what is my opinion of all the characters returning in Mandalorian 2? Which ones were the best and most effective? I mean, I guess it's okay, but I'm going to be honest. I don't really remember Season 2 all that much. I don't really watch it. I mean, I'm kind of... Like, I remember watching it, but I didn't really pay attention to what was really going on. I know that, like, a few characters came back. Like, I think Luke Skywalker had a cameo and Boba Fett made a cameo, but that was about it. But in terms of, like, what characters were actually doing, I didn't really keep track of it. And whenever Season 3 starts, I'm probably going to wait until everyone's like stops talking about it before I go check it out myself. Like I'm staying away from Disney Star Wars for a while until I feel confident that it's in a good place, and I don't feel that way about it right now. So yeah, that's really all I can say about The Mandalorian 2 and some of the characters. Next question comes from SuperBob64Man. You want to know, what is my favorite game on PSP, and do I still own one? Do I still own one? The answer is yes. I very much still own my PSP and my favorite game on it. I guess it's a switch. It's a jump between either, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, which I consider to be one of the most underrated games of all time, and for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. It's one of those two. But that, I guess that's kind of parallel to how I feel about Final Fantasy and Metal Gear, since those are like my 2 favorite video game franchises of all time. So sometimes they're kind of neck and neck. Next question comes from Zach Tarf. You want to know, so what do I think of the Dark Knight trilogy? Do you think there will be any superhero movies as good? Well, that's kind of subjective. I mean, I enjoyed the trilogy. I mean, Batman Begins is a great origin movie. Dark Knight is probably my favorite comic book somewhat related film of all time. And even though I don't really think The Dark Knight Rises quite stuck the landing as well as most of us had hoped, I would still consider it like the bare minimum of what you would call like a great superhero movie. So yeah, now the question is, do I think I'll see a movie I'll enjoy as well as The Dark Knight? Probably not. But I think as a trilogy, it's a strong comic book trilogy, but, there's a couple of other trilogies that, they have very good first entries, and the second one is better, and then the third one just isn't quite as good and is the weakest entry, and, the Dark Knight trilogy certainly falls into that category, so it kind of fits in the same realm as, trilogies like the first X-Men trilogy, or the Spider-Man Sam Raimi films, or even the Blade trilogy. It fits in that sort of realm, at least in my opinion. Next question comes from Sinovic, another double question. And this one I was very conflicted about because it just didn't make sense by the logic of Metal Gear in general. But you want to know, how do I think Metal Gear timeline would have been affected if Oh, God. I'm going to admit, this question made me nauseous because the idea was just sickening. But how do I think the Metal Gear timeline would have been affected if, here it comes, Big Boss loved and treated Solid Snake like his son? Do you think David could bring his father to his senses, or would he adapt to the ideology of the former Snake? Okay, here's the problem with this question in general. Big Boss never wanted to have kids. That's the issue. The issue with that question is that Big Boss never wanted kids. The only reason that Solid and Liquid and Solidus were even created were to be used as weapons. against Big Boss. There was at no point any plans for them to form some sort of father-son relation. Big Boss was not interested in being a father. It would be the equivalent of someone getting your DNA and creating three genetically engineered children. I mean, would you have a loving relationship if you didn't want to have kids? I mean, you'd be pretty mad about it. And then one of your kids kind of ends up somewhat almost killing you and putting you in a vegetated state. I don't think you'd be very happy. And on top of that, how like Solid Snake is not Luke Skywalker here. Big Boss is pretty devoted to his plan, so I don't see how they're just meant for opposing views. Again, Solid Snake to his core is nothing but a genetically engineered weapon to take out Big Boss, and he did his job. And then it wasn't until after Big Boss had been taken out that he sort of started to come up with his own path about what he wanted to do with his life. But yeah, at that point, that's just ridiculous. So yeah, it wouldn't happen, because if that, like, it just wouldn't happen. Just the idea of it, just I can't even comprehend something like that. It breaks everything. I wouldn't even know what the story would be if that happens. That's why it's best not to think about it. And next question is also another Metal Gear question, which is a little bit similar, but it comes from Brady Burke, and you want to know, if Gray Fox had stayed with Foxhound, would he still have gone on to become the cyborg ninja, but more advanced, similar to Raiden's? No. Oh no, 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 no. If by some chance Frank Yeager never switched sides, he would have just remained a standard soldier. What basis would there have been? What reason would there have been to modify him? The only reason he was even picked was because his body was blown apart by a landmine. So it wasn't done. I mean, him being turned to the cyborg ninja was not a choice. It was what needed to be done just so he could survive. And the whole thing with Raiden, the reason that happened was because he was captured and they wanted to experiment on him. I mean, that's the only reason he became a cyborg. It wasn't by choice. So the idea of would he still become a ninja? No, he would not. He would just still be a regular soldier, no different than what Snake was, or Solid Snake was. There'd be no difference. So yeah, no, he would not be, and he would not be morphed into a ninja or a cyborg. He wouldn't. He would just remain a soldier. And the last question of the episode comes from the Batman of Neo Gotham, and you want to know, when a popular video game series switches up its gameplay formula, what changes do you think are necessary to make the good game? Well, not really necessarily changes. The idea, I think, when you change up your gameplay, like let's say, like, okay, I mean, I'm guessing you're thinking of God of War. To its core, God of War 4 is still a hack and slash game. It just incorporates elements that just weren't present in the previous games. It added an RPG element. It had a much more in-depth story. And it changed the camera location. I mean, the camera at one point with the original games was like out there, so you could kind of see the area. But this one, it's kind of always behind here, like over the shoulder. I mean, that's really... so, by essence, it didn't necessarily change the gameplay style. It just changed how it was presented. And it added elements that made the gameplay a little bit more in-depth. It added more gameplay mechanics, and it gave more player choice in terms of how you perform your hack and slash attacks, or what you equip, what armor you equip Kratos with. Those choices were never present in the previous games because it was a much more straightforward hack and slash. So I would say if you don't really change anything. You simply slightly modify it, but you kind of keep the same feel. Well, maybe not feeling. But you kind of keep it similar to what it had always been. You just present it in a different way. And I think that's what God of War 4 did. Very, very successful. I can't think of too many games that like completely change its format and have been successful. Like you take something like Mortal Kombat. They tried going away from being a fighting game, and most times it didn't work. I think the only time it did kind of work was when they did Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. But you think of things like the action adventure of Sub-Zero mythology or Special Forces with Jax. Those typically don't work. I mean, would you want to see them turn Call of Duty into a racing game? It just doesn't work. I mean, it usually doesn't work. So again, I don't think when franchises switch, they don't change its gameplay format. They just change how it's presented. And if you can at least keep the same sort of feeling and idea, it more than likely will end up working. So that'll about do it for this episode of People's Questions. I want to thank everybody that sent in your questions, whether I answered them in the video or in the last comment section of the last video. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below, but make sure you get them into roughly before noon of Thursday before I start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next week.